This is DeGaris, Masculist, Mgtow, Flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and Mgtow, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo DeGaris. This is flyer number 537, entitled Women's Big Three Gender Crimes Against Men: Manslavery, Forced Paternity, Divorce Court Butchery, same thing. Description: this flyer presents and labels the big three gender crimes that women commit against men. By packaging them and labeling them in this soundbite format, will make it much easier for millions of masculistic men to browbeat monoconscious feminists who are cynical that women oppress men worse than vice versa. Now the flyer itself. Women's Big Three Gender Crimes Against Men: Manslavery, Forced Fatherhood, Divorce Court Butchery, by Prof. Dr. Hugo DeGaris. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. In the 2020s, millions of masculistic men are going to be confronted by monoconscious feminists who challenge these men to show them just how women oppress men. To monoconscious feminists, the masculist claim that, in fact, women oppress men worse than vice versa sounds ludicrous, since that masculist claim goes so counter to what feminists, monoconscious feminists, have been taught all their lives. That gender oppression is a one-way street, that it is men who are the oppressors and women who are the oppressed. So in some conversation, when a masculist tells some woman, some monoconscious feminist, that in reality women oppress men worse, since women's gender crimes against men last decades, making them a lot more serious, then that feminist will want to know why the masculist thinks what he thinks. She will want to know just how women oppress men worse than vice versa, since she has probably never heard anything like that before in her life. This ignorance on the part of women is so strong that the media is almost totally pro-feminist, to such a point that the feminist mafia who controls the media doesn't allow anything pro-masculist to penetrate their feminist monopoly. So most women, nearly all women, know nothing about masculism, so know nothing about how women oppress men. This flyer presents a package deal to men, to masculistic men, that will allow men to present 3 of the major ways that women oppress men, with each way labelled in a pithy, compact way that can be used in a soundbite type presentation that will get a woman's attention. This flyer explains the big three, that is, the big 3 ways that women commit gender crimes against men, that is, oppress men, that is, with women's manslavery, with women's forced fatherhood, and women's divorce court butchery. When masculists rattle off these 3 oppressions that women commit against men, bam, 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 it has quite an effect on women, since they see that the masculists have something to say, that the masculists have labels for the things they talk about, and use them as a big stick, beating women with it, fighting back at feminist claims that it is men who are the gender oppressors. Masculists are very aware that there is power in labels. So labeling the major ways that women oppress men focuses attention on these gender crimes that women commit against men. Budding masculists can use these labels and these examples of the major ways that women oppress men, these gender crimes committed by women against men, to convince women that gender oppression is a two-way street, and that if women don't see this, then they'll be justifiably labelled MFBs, that's monoconscious feminazi bigots, and crossed off as potential girlfriends. What are these big three gender crimes that women commit against men? They are presented here in order of their importance, their size, their impact, their significance. Far and away, the worst gender crime that women commit against men is their man-slavery. That is, expecting, fluffy style, that a man should work for her for decades of his life, thus man-slaving him. Fluffies, by definition, are traditional women who expect to live off the money and labour of a man for decades of his life. Over a century ago, women had a dozen kids, so were busy from dawn till dusk, so pulled their weight in the distribution of chores at home and work. But in today's world, women have a life expectancy of 85 years, thanks to men giving women science-based medicine. Men gave women the pill, household gadgets, higher education, so that women now have a career window of half a century. So Maskless put enormous moral pressure on women to FIP up, in brackets, become FIPs, equals financially independent persons, by bothering to get career competent educations so that they can be FIPs as adults and not expect fluffy style to parasite off the money and labour of a gullible, stupid, ignorant, in brackets, of Maskless and Mgtow ideas, man-slavable man for decades of his life. Maskless now stand up, point the finger at women, telling them, now that you women can work, you must work. Anything else is man-slavery, and man-slavery will get you hated and killed. Man-slavery is a war issue to the Maskless. End quote. Maskless see fluffies as vermin to be wiped out, as oppressing men in massive numbers. There are several billion man-slaves in the world today whom the Maskless are out to liberate by converting fluffies into FIPs, or punishing them severely by wiping out their fluffy man-slaving genes from the gene pool, by totally ignoring them, not even pumping and dumping them, so that either they FIP up or they die out, hated by the Maskless, spat at, left rotting on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and excluded by men socially and sexually. This man-slavery by fluffies is far and away the largest gender crime that women commit against men, given the huge numbers of women who are fluffies and the huge number of men, in brackets, several billion, who have yet to have their consciousness raised, who have been utterly brainwashed that their role in life is to be a man-slave, to work for a woman for decades of his life. The second major gender crime that women commit against men is forced fatherhood. That is, millions of women, often in their 30s, when their biological clock is ticking hard and they really want to have a baby before they become infertile, lie to their boyfriend, husbands, partners, that they're taking the pill, but aren't, because they want to get pregnant. Do, then demand that the father pay for the kid that he doesn't want. Maskless are murderously hateful that women have the MARA, that's maternity rejection right, aka abortion right, but men don't, yet, have the PARA, paternity rejection right. So millions of women force fatherhood onto a man that he cannot get out of, thus man-slaving him for decades of his life to pay for a kid that he didn't want in the first place. This gender crime by women is truly hated by Maskless, who push hard for the legislation of the PARA. Maskless claim that the existence of the MARA for women, but the non-existence of the PARA for men, is the most blatant form of sexual discrimination that exists, and it's not against women, but against men. Women who do this to men are hated by masculists and are utterly rejected, spat at, reviled, and forced to rot on the shelf. The third major way that women commit gender crimes against men is their divorce court butchery of men in the divorce courts by monoconscious, fluffy feminists who control these courts. Masculists label these divorce court lawyers and judges who control these courts as fluffy feminists, since these women are feminists but know nothing about masculism, so still have traditional expectations of men, seeing men as cash machines, quote,
who exist on this earth to pay for women to have babies,
end quote. When a fluffy wife divorces her husband, these fluffy feminist divorce court lawyers and judges see the husband as the cash machine who continues to pay for his fluffy wife, now ex-wife. So the divorcing husband and father ends up getting butchered by these fluffy feminists by losing custody of his kids with a 90% probability. He will lose his house to his fluffy ex-wife, so his fluffy ex-wife can raise her kids in it. He will lose half his wealth and stuff to her, forced to make child payments to his kids, whom he will barely be allowed to see. And if his ex-wife is a real fluffy, he may be forced to pay her alimony for the rest of his life, with no moral nor legal obligation on her to get off her fat parasitic ass and flip up. So she continues to manslave him after the divorce the way she did before the divorce. These fluffy feminists